In the quiet corridors and daily routines of retirement homes, patterns begin to emerge that go far beyond the surface-level observations most outsiders ever get to see, and those who work day in and day out with seniors. Those dedicated staff members who help with meals, medication, movement, and more often become silent witnesses to the hidden factors that accelerate aging more than any genetic trait or birthday could ever do. Because what truly impacts the rate at which a person ages isn't always found in a medical chart or in a bottle of pills, but in the rhythms of their daily life, their attitudes, their choices, and the environments that shape them. And retirement home workers, often spending more time with residents than even their families do, begin to see patterns with remarkable clarity, and they'll quietly tell you that while medical conditions certainly play a role, the true drivers of rapid aging are far more subtle and surprisingly preventable. And among the most consistent and heartbreaking patterns observed is the toll of social isolation, which isn't always as obvious as sitting alone in a room. Because even in places bustling with staff and fellow residents, many seniors still experience a profound sense of emotional loneliness, often stemming from a lack of deep, meaningful interaction. And when someone feels unseen or unheard, even when surrounded by others, their cognitive decline seems to quicken, their energy drains, and their motivation to engage with life gradually fades. And this isn't about casual small talk or daily check-ins. It's about the absence of real human connection, eye contact that lingers with care, conversations that stir memories or spark curiosity, and a sense that someone genuinely cares not just for their safety, but for their story. And retirement home workers have noted time and again that those who regularly receive visits from loved ones, who stay connected to friends or community groups, or who actively participate in creative or social activities, age with a vibrancy and resilience that others simply don't. And the difference is visible not just in emotional well-being, but in physical stamina, appetite, even posture and mobility, because the mind and body are inseparably linked. And when the mind is deprived of warmth and connection, the body often follows suit, slowing down, stiffening, losing vitality one unnoticed day at a time. And another surprising yet powerful contributor to faster aging is a loss of autonomy. Something caregivers quietly observe and wish more families understood, because it's not just about the big decisions. It's about the dozens of small choices that define a person's sense of self, from deciding what to wear in the morning to choosing what to eat or how to spend their afternoon. And when these decisions are taken over, even with good intentions, it begins to strip away a person's identity, leading to a subtle erosion of self-confidence, motivation, and eventually independence. And staff members will tell you that those residents who are given room to express preferences, to try and fail, to direct their own day as much as possible, remain sharper, more physically active, and emotionally stable. Because autonomy fosters purpose, and purpose is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. And unfortunately, when routines become too rigid or when every part of the day is dictated without input, a person's will to engage fades, and you start to see the lights go out behind their eyes a little bit more each day, even if their vital signs remain stable. And finally, perhaps the most underestimated and quietly devastating factor that accelerates aging is chronic stress, often in the form of unresolved emotional trauma, grief, or anxiety that's been suppressed for years. Because while many assume that retirement years are peaceful and free from life's earlier worries, the truth is that aging itself can bring an onslaught of new emotional burdens: loss of a spouse, moving out of a lifelong home, the decline of the body, the fear of becoming a burden, and many times these feelings remain unspoken, internalized, and ignored, and staff in retirement homes see this silent suffering. The sudden loss of appetite, the increased fatigue, the bouts of tearfulness, the withdrawal from activities that once brought joy. And they've come to understand that these are not just symptoms of age. They're signs of emotional wounds that have been left untended. And over time, the weight of these inner stresses seems to take a greater toll on the body than physical illness alone, leading to increased inflammation, decreased immune function, and quicker progression of age-related decline. And this is why some residents who seem physically healthy on paper still decline rapidly, because their emotional health is quietly crumbling beneath the surface. And unless it's addressed through real listening, counseling, or meaningful human contact, that decline can be swift and irreversible. And the heartbreaking reality is that many families are unaware of these patterns or unknowingly contribute to them by assuming their loved one is fine as long as they're medically stable and safe, not realizing that emotional neglect, loss of purpose, and disconnection can be just as dangerous to a senior as any disease. And that is what retirement home workers, those compassionate, observant individuals, wish they could say out loud more often, because they've seen firsthand how quickly someone can age when these three invisible forces are at play. And conversely, how dramatically a senior's health and spirit can improve when these forces are addressed, even in small ways. And the beauty is that none of these contributors to aging are fixed in stone. And even late in life, with the right support, the right awareness, and consistent compassionate effort, the clock doesn't have to tick quite so fast. And what's perhaps even more eye-opening is how quickly these three subtle forces, loneliness, loss of autonomy, and chronic emotional stress, begin to affect not just a person's mood or day-to-day energy, but their very biology. Their posture begins to stoop, not simply from the natural curve of aging bones, but from a kind of emotional collapse that slowly sets in when someone feels irrelevant or invisible. And it's something retirement home workers witness more often than they'd like, seeing a once cheerful resident start skipping meals, refusing to get out of bed, or losing interest in hobbies they used to love, not because their body has failed them, but because their spirit has grown weary. And in such environments, even a small shift can be monumental. And one of the most hopeful realizations these caregivers come to is that age doesn't have to mean decline, because they've seen residents in their late 80s or 90s bounce back from states of depression, inactivity, or confusion, simply because someone made them feel heard, valued, and empowered again. And it's a powerful reminder that aging faster is not inevitable. It's often the result of the environment we create for seniors, either consciously or through neglect, and that environment is shaped not only by family involvement, but by the tone of care, the culture of the facility, and even the kind of interaction staff are encouraged to have. Because when workers are given time and space to connect, when their roles are not limited to just completing tasks, but also to nurturing human interaction, the difference it makes is stunning. And it doesn't require grand changes or expensive therapies to slow the march of time for these residents. It can be as simple as calling someone by their name in a tone of warmth, asking about their childhood memories, encouraging them to make a choice about their meals, inviting them to participate in storytelling or a sing-along, and watching their eyes light up when they realize someone truly wants to listen, because those little sparks of recognition, that sense of matching, is what sustains the human heart, and it keeps the cognitive wheels turning far better than any crossword puzzle ever could. And while brain games and physical exercise are undeniably helpful, they're not the magic bullet many believe them to be if done in a vacuum devoid of emotional connection or personal significance. Because one of the most consistent observations from long-term staff members is that seniors thrive not from routine alone, but from routine that includes genuine engagement. And when that is stripped away or never offered in the first place, aging seems to accelerate, as if the person begins to feel that life no longer expects anything from them. And once that sense of irrelevance settles in, it becomes a kind of silent illness that affects their will to move, their desire to eat, even their immune response. And this emotional decline often precedes more obvious signs of physical deterioration, which is why those closest to the residents are often able to predict who will begin to struggle long before a doctor's chart shows any change. And yet, despite this firsthand knowledge, many of these workers feel powerless to intervene meaningfully, either due to understaffing, overregulation, or simply because society does not always value the insight of those working on the front lines of elder care, even though they're the ones seeing the daily micro shifts that determine the pace of someone's decline or resilience. And it becomes painfully clear to them which seniors are going to lose their sharpness faster, not because of a diagnosis, but because of how they are treated, talked to, and engaged with over time. And if more families understood just how much of a difference their involvement made, or how a small weekly call or visit could actually reverse early signs of mental withdrawal or emotional flattening, perhaps more would be willing to put in that consistent effort, because it's not always about grand gestures. It's about showing up, listening, validating, and empowering. And when staff see residents who are supported by families that ask for their opinion, involve them in decisions, and treat them like valuable members of the family rather than burdens to be managed, they also see residents who age more slowly, who bounce back from illness more easily, who take pride in grooming, in laughter, in eating well, and it becomes clear that feeling needed is perhaps one of the most potent anti-aging forces there is. And without it, even the best nutrition, medication, and sleep schedule cannot fully protect someone from emotional atrophy. And this is especially true when it comes to seniors who were once deeply independent, because when someone who has lived a full, rich, self-directed life suddenly finds themselves at the mercy of rigid routines, well-meaning rules, and impersonal systems, it can create a subtle form of helplessness that begins to sap their energy in ways that are hard to articulate and even harder to reverse. And this is where the wisdom of retirement home workers becomes especially valuable, because they learn to read between the lines, to notice what's unsaid, to recognize that a resident snapping at breakfast staff or refusing to bathe may not be acting out, but may actually be expressing a loss of agency or dignity in the only way they know how. And this deeper understanding often doesn't make it into medical notes or family updates, but it's there in the everyday observations, the patterns that become clear only after months or years of working closely with aging individuals. And these workers know that for seniors to thrive, their needs can't be reduced to physical checklists alone, because aging is not a purely physical process. It's emotional, mental, and deeply spiritual. And if those dimensions are neglected, the physical decline comes faster than anyone expects. And while that may sound daunting, it's actually empowering, because it means that with greater awareness, compassion, and attention, aging faster is something that can be prevented not through medication or supplements, but through daily acts of respect, inclusion, and care that reinforce a person's sense of identity, value, and connection to the world around them. And as this understanding deepens, as those working closest to seniors begin to internalize how fragile yet responsive the aging process truly is, it becomes clearer than ever that the body often follows the lead of the spirit, meaning that the emotional and psychological state of a person doesn't merely influence, but in many cases actually dictates the speed at which they age. Because it's not just bones growing weaker or joints getting stiff that marks the passage of time, but also the heaviness in the eyes, the slowing of speech, the reluctance to engage with others. And retirement home staff often recognize these patterns before any medical test does, noting how quickly someone can go from vibrant to withdrawn in the span of a few weeks when their environment becomes overly clinical, their choices limited, or their human connections diminished. And they begin to see how routine without relationship, safety without significance, and care without compassion can paradoxically lead to faster decline, even when all the boxes on a care checklist are being ticked. Because people aren't just bodies, they are histories, personalities, bundles of emotion, longing, memory, and potential, no matter their age. And when these inner dimensions are nurtured with patience and presence, aging slows down in ways that are visible and meaningful, such as improved appetite, more consistent sleep, better cooperation with physical therapy, and greater interest in participating in group activities, all of which form a virtuous cycle that strengthens the mind-body connection and builds a kind of resilience that no pill can replicate. And retirement home workers witness this transformation again and again in residents who, after weeks or even months of decline, suddenly begin to reawaken because someone took the time to sit and ask them about their favorite song growing up, or invited them to teach a younger staff member how to bake a dish from their childhood, or ask for their advice on something simple, giving them a role again, a reason to show up for their day. And it's in these moments that the trajectory of aging can shift dramatically, not by reversing time, but by re-engaging purpose. And one cannot overstate how powerful that purpose is, because people who feel they matter are more likely to keep moving, to take their medications, to hydrate, to participate in life. And yet this is often where systems fall short, because institutional care, no matter how well-meaning, tends to focus on the measurable. The blood pressure readings, the number of steps walked, the number of meals consumed, while often underestimating the immeasurable. The way someone's face lights up when they hear from a grandchild, or the change in posture that follows a moment of sincere praise. And these subtleties, so easy to overlook, are often the very things that determine whether someone is merely existing or truly living. And the truth is, many retirement home workers carry a quiet frustration, knowing that the solutions to faster aging are not always complex or costly, but rather require a shift in mindset from everyone involved, from families, from administrators, from society at large, to prioritize presence over procedure and humanity over habit. And while regulations and safety protocols are undeniably important, they cannot and should not take the place of warmth, flexibility, and emotional attunement, because the absence of these things creates a sterile environment where the elderly are safe but slowly fading. And these caregivers know the difference. They feel it in their interactions. They see it in the subtle changes of mood and motivation. And many carry that burden silently, wishing they could speak up more often without being dismissed or overruled by rigid protocols or staff shortages. Because in truth, it's often the lowest paid and most overlooked workers who understand aging the best. Not because they've read studies or attended conferences, but because they've spent hours holding trembling hands, hearing life stories, seeing what works and what doesn't, and learning through lived experience that people age faster when they feel forgotten, unheard, or overly controlled, and slower when they feel seen, respected, and empowered to shape their days, however modestly. And this growing body of intuitive wisdom should not be discounted, because it's backed not by data points, but by real human outcomes. The resident who suddenly begins dressing up for breakfast again, the one who starts humming in the hallway, the one who no longer refuses group walks, all because someone treated them as a whole person rather than a patient or a task. And this shift doesn't happen through policy changes alone, but through the repeated choices made each day, to speak with kindness, to offer a choice, to wait an extra moment for a response, to bring up a memory rather than rush to a routine. And over time, these tiny acts accumulate into something profound, creating an atmosphere where life is not just prolonged but enriched. And this, more than anything else, is what slows the march of time for seniors, because it reminds them that life still has texture, meaning, and possibility. And retirement home workers, if asked, will tell you that the secret to aging well is not found in supplements or high-tech devices, but in a smile offered with sincerity, a question asked with interest, a story remembered and retold, in a relationship that says, "You are still important." And when that message is delivered consistently, by staff, by family, by fellow residents, it creates an emotional buffer against the losses and limitations that aging naturally brings, giving seniors something much more valuable than a clean bill of health. It gives them the sense that they're still living a life worth waking up to each day. And it's with this knowledge, accumulated not in textbooks, but in the day-to-day realities of elder care, that retirement home workers quietly become witnesses to a truth the wider world often fails to acknowledge. That aging is not simply about time passing, but about what that time feels like, how it's experienced, and whether those later years are filled with connection, choice, and dignity, or instead marked by isolation, restriction, and monotony. And the difference between the two is more profound than any medical test can capture, because when a senior begins to lose that spark, when their eyes no longer lift to meet yours, when they stop asking questions or telling stories or even expressing preferences, it's not just a sign of aging. It's a signal that something deeper is being lost, something vital. And tragically, that loss is often preventable. And the people who see this most clearly are the ones who interact with seniors on a deeply human level, noticing the subtle changes that come with emotional neglect, or conversely, the surprising vitality that emerges when someone simply feels seen again. And that's why they speak up about these three things that make seniors age faster. Not to blame, but to awaken awareness in families, in professionals, in anyone who cares about helping older adults live fully, not just longer, because it's not aging itself that is the enemy. It's the invisible erosion of identity, purpose, and joy that can accompany it when the emotional and psychological needs of seniors are treated as secondary. When life becomes a series of passive routines rather than active participation. And what makes all of this even more urgent is the reality that these three aging accelerators, loneliness, loss of control, and emotional neglect, rarely appear as urgent problems until it's too late, until mobility declines, until memory starts slipping, until physical symptoms begin to multiply, and only then do families or caregivers start asking what went wrong. But by then, the deeper emotional roots have often been left unaddressed for months or even years. And that's why this message matters so much, because it calls us all to pay attention sooner, to see aging not just as a physical process, but as a deeply emotional one, and to recognize that seniors, even the quietest or most withdrawn among them, are still people who crave meaning, connection, and autonomy in their own ways. And when those needs are met, the benefits ripple outward. Less depression, fewer hospitalizations, greater cooperation with care, and most importantly, a richer day-to-day life that feels worth living. And retirement home workers know this because they've seen residents go from silent and distant to smiling and engaged, from slouched and disconnected to walking tall and participating again. And they know that while time cannot be stopped, the quality of that time is entirely within our collective hands. And that starts with how we talk to seniors, how we involve them, how we honor their preferences, and how we show them that they still matter in the story of their families, their communities, and their lives. Because when a person feels they still belong, that their voice still carries weight, something powerful happens. They begin to stand taller, speak louder, think more clearly, and laugh more often. And that isn't just anecdotal. It's been echoed by caregivers, companions, and even medical professionals who are finally beginning to grasp how emotional health and physical health are inseparable, especially in the later stages of life. And it's why everyone who loves a parent, a grandparent, or an older neighbor should take seriously these truths shared by retirement home staff. Not out of fear, but out of opportunity, because knowing these things allows us to act, to shift the course of someone's aging experience in small but meaningful ways, like regular phone calls, shared meals, open-ended conversations, and chances to contribute, teach, or create. And when we consistently show our elders that they're still valued, still invited to participate, still part of something bigger than themselves, we offer them one of the most powerful antidotes to aging fast: relevance. And with relevance comes engagement. And with engagement comes vitality. And that is something no pill or product can replace. And if this message resonates with you, if it stirs something in your heart or reminds you of someone you care about, then perhaps the most important thing you can do today is not to worry about adding more years to life, but to add more life to the years of someone you love, starting now, because the truth is, we're all aging, and what we learn today about those ahead of us will shape how we're treated tomorrow. And that's why here at Healthful Living 60 Plus, we share the wisdom, the science, and the stories that help us age with grace, strength, and purpose. And if you're ready to explore more Insights like this, whether it's about emotional wellness, daily habits that promote longevity, or the subtle ways we can all support our elders with more kindness and clarity, then make sure you stay connected with our channel, because the journey of aging isn't one we walk alone, it's one we walk together. And it's our mission to ensure that no senior, no matter where they live or what their circumstances are, ever feels forgotten, and that every one of us is empowered with the knowledge and tools to turn aging into something rich, meaningful, and alive with possibility.